Let's take a look at some of the formal methodologies and the reason they exist and what they might have in common. Basically, these methodologies that we're going to talk about provide structured framework for processes and procedures for testing against various targets. Now, the great thing about having an established formal methodology is that it allows you to be consistent so that you do not overlook any possible attack venues or vulnerabilities, or maybe there's a corner of the network sitting off over there you forgot about because you never wrote down the step-by-step process. In other words, having that methodology formalized and established is definitely valuable. And ultimately, the goal of the methodology, in these formal methodologies specifically, is to provide the most comprehensive testing possible. So we're going to take a look at 4 common established and published methodologies. The first one we're going to look at is the OSSTMM, or Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual. And this is actually the particular methodology that I tend to lean most towards, and that's just out of personal preference. Each one of these have major benefits to using them. So I'm going to give you kind of the cookie cutter information associated with each one per the associated description of that particular methodology. So for the OSSTMM, it's basically a methodology for performing security tests and metrics. It's going to break out cases into 5 different channels or sections, which basically test different targets such as information and data controls, personnel security awareness, fraud and engineering control, computer and telecommunications, wireless devices, mobile devices, physical security access, security processes, and physical locations and associated security such as buildings and perimeters. So it's a very comprehensive methodology, but it may be a little overkill just to use for penetration and hacking methodologies. So there's a lot more involved in the OSSTMM than just security testing. Next one we're going to talk about is the NIST Special Publication 800-42, which basically just provides guidance on network security testing specifically by identifying security testing requirements, prioritization of testing activities with limited resources, and basically breaking down the network security testing techniques and tools associated. So the NIST is actually fairly regularly used by federal, state, and local law enforcement offices, especially for those departmental or state organizations. NIST is actually designed specifically for that purpose. The next one we're going to talk about is the TRAWG, sometimes called TRAWG. And that stands for Threat and Risk Assessment Working Guide. And again, this is actually proposed and built for IT systems, but the concept of threat and risk assessment is not just limited to that. This particular guide provides guidance for an individual or department carrying out a threat and risk assessment for different proposed IT systems. It's going to help determine which critical assets are most at risk within those systems and ultimately lead to recommendations for safeguards to kind of move that risk up to an acceptable level. So this deals a lot with, as its name suggests, risk assessment. Octave is also a commonly used methodology and stands for Operationally Critical Threat Assess and Vulnerability Evaluation. The idea behind Octave is that it provides criteria to define a standard approach for a risk-driven access, asset, and practice-based information security evaluation. Basically just meaning that identifying the causes and the individual goals defined for a security evaluation, Octave can provide for risk-driven, asset, and practice-based information requirements. Basically, Octave is going to be used for larger corporation environments which are heavily reliant on the metrics associated with a risk-driven environment. So as you can see, each of the individual formal methodologies we've discussed here each have strengths and weaknesses. Some of them might be risk-based, some of them might be particular process-based or might be built for a specific organization. I definitely recommend that you go through and thoroughly analyze and understand all 4 of these different methodologies and even any additional ones that you can find. Again, the ultimate goal, building your own personalized methodology that works well for you and that you can rely on. Again, it's got to be flexible.